Welcome, as always, to Ena Harmony, a space to ponder on our real being as an expression of the tree of life. For sure, most of you have heard the expression that says, life passes by. However, notice that this is not entirely true, because certainly life flows, but it flows from beyond the sphere of time existence, so it cannot be affected by death. It cannot pass away or pass by as something that is and is not. Life is always. Death is not part of life, as we are told many times. We are cells or expressions of the tree of life and go through the tree of knowledge of good and bad, which is actually the essence of existence, the illusion of time, we may say. And the flow of life is very much a process of cosmic breathing from the divine source. And as manifestations of the divine breathing, our finality or divine mission is to go across the tree of knowledge of good and bad and transform darkness, bringing opposites back to the source and coming even more alive, because as we go through existence we absorb nutrients that make the soul tree grow stronger. Now, those nutrients do not come from the tree of knowledge, but from the tree of life, our own essence, which is within. And for me it's been a great surprise to find out that ancient civilizations and many cultures knew somehow the divine verb, or the divine name as it is called, associated to breathing, and they all mentioned it in a similar way. You all know the famous YHWH, what some translate as Jehova or Yahweh. And as we study other expressions of the same name, we find out that it's expressed in our own process of breathing. When we breathe in and breathe out, there is a sound. Notice how some vowels seem to come out as well. We can even notice harmonics. There is a whole harmonic series in which the pure tones, which are the harmonics, come forth in a certain order. There is a natural harmonia. And we can notice how the pronunciation of a sequence of vowels in the process of breathing and speaking express exactly that harmonic series. And those vowels are exactly what we find in the divine name of different cultures. And as we go deep investigating the qualities of the divine breath in us, we find out several sequences of vowels, as I said, which can be used as a symbol of the movement. This would be YHWH or YHWH or YHWH or you. In a way, the divine breathing is pointing to us as well. because it's not the name of a god as an entity, but the movement that points to the being which is an intelligence, an intimate intelligence, but has no name as we understand a name. The process of breathing is also expressed in the consonants YHWH, which some translate as Jehova or Yahweh, believing that it's referring to an entity, but it's not an entity. It's the process of breathing of the whole cosmos. The vibration of the divine being, as I've said many times, is the unconditional infinite love that gives way to pure life without death. The universal conscience where we all find ourselves as integrant expressions of unicity and serenity. Those are actually the four qualities expressed by the four letters of the Tetragrammaton. And notice how in the whole process of breathing we can read the whole history of the universe, what really happened. We find out that when air goes in and goes out, there are moments in which the process can be disrupted. There can be actually an out-breath which delays the return to the source. And this is actually what took place when some divine architects, eons of time ago, went out from the tree of life and began to build their own tree of knowledge of good and bad. This is when the universe split up in two gangs, so to say, the good ones and the bad ones, but both of them belong to a system of duality. It's quite paradoxical when something that was part of divine life in origin eventually becomes a source of death and pain and suffering. We see that expressed even in a passage of scripture, Isaiah 45, where we read, I, the sacred verb, form light and create darkness. This takes place when the divine verb is corrupted, is split, a false manifestation which we can call Yahweh or Jehova, the god Confucian worship by all religions actually, not just the monotheist. Ever since there are good divinities and bad divinities, and ancient cultures were very much aware of this. And it's interesting to notice that the Sanskrit word devas, which is probably the origin of our term divinity, was interpreted in opposite ways by the Persian culture and the Hindu culture. The Persians that live in Iran used to see devas as evil entities, whereas the Hindus regarded devas as good deities. Obviously, we can deduce that they were referring to different types of entities or beings, to the two sides of the tree of knowledge. And ancient myths and teachings also express how these two types of beings have two types of food as well. And we can also realize how we feed both sides of the universe with our manifestations. For instance, the so-called good deities feed on love, joy, mercy, for this generate energies that make them grow. And when we manifest those energies, those entities which we do not often see help us, that's true, even though this is not a motive to worship them as some cultures do, because we come from beyond. In the same way, when we feed fear, anger, hate in ourselves, some negative entities gather around to feed on those negative energies, and they may even generate calamities to make us suffer and get us nervous so they can continue existing with our energy. They are thieves. But as I say, we come from beyond duality, so we are an expression of the whole being, even though the infinite being is far greater than each one of our individual expressions, and even greater than the good God or bad God. And his divine verb is merciful enough to allow beings go out of the tree of life, but in the same way transforms and dissolves any type of duality, as in a black hole. Even some physicists admit that in the center of every atom there is a black hole in which not even light can escape. Now, since the great infinite being has an I amness or essence that expands over the tree of life and even the tree of knowledge, embracing everything, it's not entirely intelligent to call that God. In ancient times, actually, God, whether good or bad, was represented with two dragons and the Ouroboros as well, the serpent that bites its own tail, because it's part of a process of polarity, as I said. Even in the word God, we find a duality, because when we read it backwards, it's dog. Some cultures even regarded the figure of the dog as a symbol for a deity. The dog star Sirius, for instance, was associated to wisdom, as well as the fool. And there is actually, as some teachings say, a good dog and a bad dog inside ourselves. There is a fool dog inside ourselves. And the one who wins is the one who we feed the most. But, as I say, recognize that we are beyond those games of duality. And our mission is to transform, go back to unicity. And in this process we must understand our role in the harvest of energies. I suggest you to read, for instance, Matthew 24, versicle 40-41, in which Master Yeshua says that there will be two in the field. The field had been described in other passages as the world of the harvest of souls, energies. And he goes on saying that there will be two women on the mill, and one shall be taken and the other left. Two women are a reference for the human mortal soul and the divine immortal soul. The mill is a reference to the grinding of souls in the process of reincarnation, the Gilgul in Hebrew, the wheel of existence, in which everything is recycled. Even the so-called good souls, not all of them escape reincarnation. And further on that passage, the Master says, and if the owner of the house, which is each one of us, owners of our inner house, had known when the thief would come, he would not have let him in. Since we are in a world of thieves, we must be very aware what we feed. As I said before, there are two sides that eat different manifestations, and we should not worship any of them in any way, even though the so-called good side of the universe and good deity might make it somehow easier for us to access our true essence. For obviously the adversary of the opposite side can make things very difficult. But when we are full expressions of the tree of life, we have even the ability to command and have the good side of the universe on our side and help us cross safe. And to finish this episode, I invite you to observe your own breathing naturally, not as a technique or something like that. Preferably through the nose, because it's easier to pay attention. And notice how at the end of every in-breath and out-breath there is a point of stillness, a space where the quietness can give way to manifest the true loving essence, the true life, the conscience of unicity and pure serenity, which are actually the divine verb and the divine being breathing through us. It's a proof that we are not part of this world of duality, full of death and lies. This can actually be the interpretation of those famous words by Shaul Paul, who said, if you confess with the mouth that Yeshu or Yeshua is the divine verb, and believe with the heart that the Father raised him from the land of the dead, then you shall be safe. He was not referring simply to a man 2000 years ago, because Yeshua means salvation by the divine verb, and that's actually what takes place when we manifest the divine qualities, allowing the only one live through us, because we do not live, because we do not exist as separate entities. Is the divine Holy One. The movement of the divine breathing, the divine verb, goes beyond all opposites, beyond pleasure, pain, beyond the contrast of light and darkness, to a point, wholeness, where we don't find an opposite to be complete. We are completeness itself. And let's not forget that the tree of knowledge of good and bad begins exactly with our physical mortal body, in which the process of transformation begins. We go from duality to oneness inside this limited body, the shell of the seed. And remember also that the shell of the seed must fall on the earth and die eventually, so that the life essence inside can come forth fully. Therefore, each one of us is Yeshua, salvation, by manifesting the truth, going through this land of the dead aware that we are individual expressions of the divine essence with a divine mission to fulfill, and breathing with the breath of life.